We live surrounded by people. Family, lovers, friends, coworkers, people we care for, people we disagree with, people we can't live without, and sometimes, people we wish we could forget. On the surface, it seems simple enough to love, to laugh, to share our days with others. But beneath those smiles, there's a hidden tension, unspoken expectations, silent disappointments, tiny wounds that no one sees, but we carry them like invisible weights on our hearts. You felt it too, haven't you? That uneasy pause before a conversation, the lingering ache after a careless word, the heaviness in a room after a disagreement no one dares to unpack. We rarely talk about it, but relationships, the very things that should nourish us, are often the ones that leave us most exhausted. Why is it that the people we love the most can sometimes hurt us the deepest? In Buddhist thought, life is an intricate web of interwoven causes and conditions. Every encounter, every bond, is the product of infinite moments that came before it. Nothing, not even a simple hello, happens by accident. You see, we don't just meet people. We meet our karma, our desires, our fears, our old wounds dressed in new faces. And without even realizing it, we tie invisible threads to everyone we meet. Threads made of attachment, of expectation, of wanting them to be a certain way, to make us feel safe, loved, important, understood. But those threads, delicate as they may be, tighten over time. A kind gesture expected again and again. A word of comfort demanded instead of offered. A role someone is forced to play long after it fits. Before long, these threads become chains. We expect our partners to complete us. We expect our friends to always agree. We expect our families to understand us without words. And when they fall short, the disappointment cuts deep. Not because they failed us, but because we imagined they could save us from ourselves. There's a simple yet profound teaching in Buddhism. All suffering comes from wanting reality to be other than it is. We don't suffer because people disappoint us. We suffer because we cling to the illusion that they shouldn't. We carry within us the weight of past hurts and future fears, projecting them onto the people around us. A lover's silence stirs old abandonment. A friend's mistake reignites ancient betrayal. A parent's disapproval echoes 1,000 unmet hopes. And so, without knowing, we begin to love through the lens of our pain. But what if it isn't them? What if the tension in our relationships isn't because others are difficult, but because we've never truly met them as they are? We've only met who we hoped, feared, or needed them to be. Mindfulness, in its truest sense, isn't just about sitting cross-legged in the quiet. It's about waking up, breath by breath, to what's really happening within and around us. It means noticing that tightening in your chest before you speak, recognizing the bitterness rising behind a forced smile, hearing the story you're telling yourself about why she didn't call or why he forgot your birthday. And in that pause, in that sacred, spacious pause, you find freedom, because you realize in that moment that you have a choice. You can cling to the old narrative, or you can meet this moment, this person, as they truly are right now. Not the partner you wish would change, not the friend you wish would apologize, not the parent you wish had been different, just them, in this breath, in this conversation, in this human, imperfect, sacred encounter. The Buddha once said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal law." But what we often miss is that this love isn't always grand or dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as a soft glance, a word unsaid, a breath taken before reacting. It's the courage to see someone's flaws and not weaponize them, to witness their pain and not turn away, to allow people the dignity of their own journey without making it about us. In a world obsessed with connection, we've forgotten how to truly relate. We gather followers, accumulate likes, collect contacts, yet ache for genuine presence. The kind where someone sits with your silence without needing to fill it. The kind where mistakes are met with compassion, not conditions. The kind where love doesn't demand perfection. And it begins, not with others but with ourselves. When we can sit in the discomfort of our own messy emotions. when we can meet our longing without judgment, when we can offer ourselves kindness in the moments we feel most unworthy, we naturally begin to offer that same spaciousness to the people around us. Because here's the truth most of us aren't taught. No relationship can be healthier than the one we have with our own heart. If you approach every connection as a way to escape yourself, you'll only find temporary relief followed by deeper loneliness. But when you carry presence, when you move through the world with awareness of your breath, your words, your reactivity, you become a refuge for yourself and others. And in that sacred space between expectation and acceptance, love takes root. A love that doesn't cling, a love that doesn't demand, a love that isn't born from fear of being alone, but from the simple, extraordinary miracle of recognizing another soul walking the same imperfect path. So tonight, as you lay your head down, remember the invisible threads you've tied today. Were they threads of fear, of expectation, of control? Or were they threads of presence, of kindness, of mindful letting go? Because the way we weave these invisible threads shapes not just our relationships, but the very fabric of our lives. And sometimes, all it takes is a breath. There's a peculiar thing about suffering. It doesn't always scream. It doesn't always arrive as tragedy or heartbreak or betrayal. More often, it seeps in quietly, a lingering dissatisfaction, a tension behind our smiles, a hollow ache in the chest when a conversation ends, and you wonder why you feel emptier than before. We convince ourselves it's normal. We blame it on busy schedules, different personalities, or simply the way life is. But deep down, we know something isn't right. Why do relationships, these sacred, beautiful connections meant to uplift us, so often become the very source of our pain? Buddhist wisdom doesn't shy away from this question. In fact, it invites us to look deeper, beyond the surface discomfort, and into the very roots of suffering itself. You see, in Buddhist philosophy, there are 3 poisons believed to lie at the heart of all suffering: attachment, aversion, and ignorance. And when it comes to relationships, these poisons slip in unnoticed, quietly dictating our every word, every reaction, every expectation. Let's begin with attachment. At first glance, attachment feels beautiful. It feels like love, like devotion, like loyalty. But attachment, in its unhealthy form, is a clinging, a desperate grasping to make something or someone permanent in a world where nothing truly is. We fall in love, and somewhere along the way, love turns into possession. We want them to stay the same, to never change, to never leave. We build invisible cages with our fears, mistaking control for care. It's why a friend's absence stings, why a partner's silence feels like abandonment, why a child growing distant feels like betrayal. Because somewhere within, we believe that holding on tighter would keep the inevitable at bay. But life, in its quiet wisdom, keeps moving. And every time it does, every time someone shifts, grows, or drifts, our attachment is threatened and suffering follows. Then there's aversion. It's the flip side of attachment. If attachment clings to what we desire, aversion rejects what we cannot bear. We recoil from discomfort, from conflict, from truths that unsettle the tidy images we've crafted of those around us. We want people to be kind, agreeable, understanding, to never reveal the messy, complicated, inconvenient parts of themselves. When they do, we label it as wrong. We pull away. We retaliate. We silently resent. And yet we forget they too, like us, are human, full of contradictions, carrying old wounds, learning, failing, growing in imperfect fits and starts. The discomfort we feel in those moments isn't born from their imperfection. It's born from our resistance to reality. Ignorance, the third poison, is perhaps the most subtle. It isn't the absence of knowledge, but the absence of awareness. We move through our relationships on autopilot, reacting without reflection, assuming without understanding, clinging to stories about people that were written years ago. We forget to question, am I seeing them as they truly are, or as who I once needed them to be? Am I speaking from the pain of this moment or the echo of an old wound? Am I loving them, or using them to fill an emptiness I refuse to name. In this haze of ignorance, we mistake dependency for love, comfort for connection, silence for peace. And slowly, silently, suffering takes root. But here's the grace hidden within Buddhist wisdom. Where there is suffering, there is also a path to freedom. The Buddha taught that the first step to liberation is simply to truly see the nature of our minds, our habits, our attachments, our fears. It isn't easy. It asks us to sit in uncomfortable truths, to admit where we've clung too tightly, where we've turned away, where we've moved through life and love half asleep. But in that seeing, something shifts. A thread loosens. A little more breath enters the room. And in that space, a different kind of love is born. A love not rooted in need, but in presence. Not in control, but in compassion. Not in illusion, but in the clear-eyed, open-hearted acceptance of what is. It's a love that allows people to be beautifully, frustratingly, achingly human. That sees their flaws and doesn't run. That recognizes their limits and doesn't demand. That honors their path, even when it no longer walks beside ours. And strangely, in loosening our grip, we find we're able to hold each other better. Not as saviors, not as possessions, but as fellow travelers, carrying our own burdens, searching for our own peace. You'll notice it in small moments first. The conversation where you don't rush to defend yourself. The argument you no longer need to win. The silence you allow without fear or assumption. And from those small moments, new relationships are born. Not new people, but new ways of being with the old ones. So if you've ever wondered why it hurts, why the people you love feel distant, why the same patterns return again and again, remember this: suffering isn't proof of a broken relationship. It's a signpost pointing you toward the places within yourself that long for healing. And when you tend to those places, when you hold them with tenderness instead of shame, you'll find that the world around you begins to soften too. Not because people changed, but because you did. And that perhaps is the quiet, sacred revolution Buddhist wisdom invites us to embrace. Somewhere along the way, we were taught to believe that we are separate from each other, separate from nature, separate from the great, unfolding current of life itself. It's an illusion we've carried for so long, it feels like truth. I am here. You are there. They are them. But have you ever noticed how a word unspoken can ripple through a room? How a stranger's sadness seems to brush against your chest? How a child's laughter, a gentle smile, or even a silent gaze can soften something in you didn't know was hard? It's because beneath the surface of names, stories, and skin, we are impossibly, inescapably connected. In Buddhist teaching, this is known as interbeing, a beautiful, subtle truth that everything and everyone exists in relation to everything else. The flower doesn't bloom alone. It carries in its petals the rain, the soil, the sunlight, the gardener's hand. Without the clouds, without the earth, without time and care, there would be no flower, and neither would you nor I. Your breath carries the memory of ancient forests, the water in your cells once part of distant rivers, the language you speak, the stories you believe, the fears you hide, all shaped by countless lives before yours. There is no separate self. There is only life, endlessly weaving itself through every being, every moment, every breath. When we forget this, we suffer, because we begin to treat people as objects, as obstacles, as tools to satisfy our own wants or threats to our imagined control. We move through relationships asking, "What can you give me? How do you make me feel? What part of my emptiness will you fill?" And when they fall short, as all humans inevitably do, we turn cold, we pull away, or we tighten our grip. But when we remember interbeing, something miraculous happens. The lines blur, the distance shrinks. We stop seeing others as separate from our happiness and start recognizing them as part of the very fabric of it. Suddenly, your partner's pain isn't a burden, it's an echo of your own. Your friend's joy doesn't spark envy, it lights a warmth inside you. A stranger's suffering on the other side of the world isn't a distant tragedy, it's a thread tugging gently at the corners of your heart. And with that knowing comes compassion. Not the kind born from pity, not a kindness handed down from a place of superiority, but a tenderness rooted in recognition. You hurt, and I too have hurt. You fear, and I too have known fear. You long to be seen, and so do I. But in this space, connection stops being a transaction and becomes a practice. A sacred daily act of remembering we belong to each other. It changes how you listen, not waiting for your turn to speak, but truly hearing the soul beneath the words. It changes how you hold anger, seeing it not as an attack, but as the language of someone's unseen wounds. It changes how you forgive, how you touch, how you leave, and how you stay. Because you realize in every face you meet, in every voice you hear, you are meeting yourself. The Buddha once said, "To understand everything is to forgive everything." Not because harm isn't real or boundaries don't matter, but because when you truly see the tangled roots beneath another's actions, their fears, their conditioning, their sorrow, you realize they are not so different from you. And that recognition softens the tightness in your chest. It makes room for compassion to rise where resentment once stood. Interbeing doesn't mean losing yourself in others. It means seeing the self more clearly as something fluid, shifting, interconnected, and infinite. It invites us to move through relationships not as isolated islands, but as waves of the same vast ocean. Each wave distinct, beautiful, and temporary, yet inseparable from the sea itself. And when you live from that place, something remarkable happens. You no longer love to be loved in return. You no longer give to be owed. You no longer cling because you realize nothing can truly be lost when everything is part of you. Your relationships become sanctuaries, not perfect, not without struggle, but places where honesty, tenderness, and presence grow. You'll notice yourself softening, pausing before a sharp word, choosing presence over distraction, offering grace, not because it's deserved, but because you remember what it's like to need it. This is the wisdom of interbeing. Not an abstract philosophy, but a living, breathing truth waiting to be remembered in each encounter, each silence, each ordinary moment. And perhaps, if we could hold this truth a little more often, we'd find our relationships feel a little less heavy, a little less lonely, and a whole lot more like coming home. Love is beautiful and dangerous. It's the most intoxicating thing we know. A look, a touch, a word spoken softly in the dark. It stirs something ancient in us, a need to belong, to be cherished, to matter. But what no one tells you is this: love without wisdom can become a cage, a gentle prison built from our own longing. We cling to moments, to people, to promises whispered when hearts were young and untouched by time. And in that clinging, suffering is born because life moves. People change, bodies grow old, words fade, and no matter how tightly you hold, what was never meant to stay will slip through your fingers. The Buddha saw this clearly, and he taught, attachment is the root of suffering. But he didn't mean we should stop loving, or turn our hearts to stone. He wasn't asking us to abandon tenderness or friendships or passion. What he offered was a deeper, freer way to love. It's called equanimity, a calm, steady heart that remains open, even in the storm. Not because it is numb, but because it understands the nature of things. To love with equanimity is to hold someone with open hands, to cherish their presence without trying to possess it, to delight in their joys without needing them to validate your own, to grieve their absence without believing you have lost a part of yourself. It is a fierce, spacious kind of love. One not built on conditions or fear. It says, I will walk beside you while our paths are joined. I will celebrate your light and sit with you in darkness. And when it is time for our roads to part, I will bless you on your way. This is non-attachment, not indifference, but liberation. In truth, attachment masquerades as love, but it is born from insecurity, from the belief that our happiness lies in another's hands. And so we grasp, we demand. We hope someone else will save us from the ache of our own emptiness. But when you practice non-attachment, you realize no one completes you. No one owes you their forever. You are already whole. And love becomes a gift freely given, not a bargain struck. In this way, relationships transform. They are no longer battlegrounds for unmet needs, nor stages for endless performance. They become spaces of mutual freedom, where you are allowed to be fully yourself, and so is the other, where disappointments are met with understanding, not because they don't hurt, but because you know everything that arises passes. The seasons of the heart, like the seasons of the earth, are meant to change, and it is not your job to cling to summer when autumn comes. Equanimity teaches us to hold joy and sorrow in the same palm, to smile in the face of beauty and to bow before loss, not denying either but honoring both as sacred, fleeting visitors, because you understand now, nothing is truly lost. It all belongs to the same vast, interconnected dance of life. And in that awareness you find peace, a peace that no betrayal can steal, no departure can shatter, no ending can extinguish, because your love was never about possession, it was about presence. It was never about keeping, it was about seeing. And that kind of love endures. It moves through every ending and reappears in new faces, new voices, new moments. You'll feel it in a child's laughter, in a stranger's kindness, in the hush of dawn before the world stirs. Because you are no longer grasping for love. You are living as love. This is what it means to practice equanimity and non-attachment in love. It is not coldness, it is clarity, a love so pure it no longer needs to cling. And in that freedom, you find the deepest connection of all. Most of us imagine mindfulness as something that happens on a meditation cushion. Eyes closed, back straight, breath steady. But the truth is, mindfulness is meant for the messy, ordinary, unpredictable world we live in. It belongs at the breakfast table, in a crowded elevator, during a difficult phone call, in the silent pause between two hurtful words. The real work of mindfulness happens in the tiny, overlooked spaces of everyday life. And that's where our relationships are either nourished or slowly fray. You see, every interaction is a seed, a small moment where we either plant peace or discord, a glance, a word, a sigh, a hand resting on a shoulder. These are the invisible threads weaving the fabric of our lives. And the Buddha taught, with our thoughts we make the world, which means with our awareness, we shape every relationship we touch. So how do we practice mindfulness in daily interactions? It begins with one simple, radical decision, to be fully here, right now, not lost in the next appointment, not replaying an argument from last night, not halfway in a conversation while scrolling your phone, but truly, unapologetically present. Because presence is a rare and precious gift. When you truly see someone, their eyes soften. When you listen without rushing to fix or reply, their heart steadies. When you pause before speaking, your own wisdom has a chance to rise. Mindfulness isn't a performance. It's not about perfect calm or saintly patience. It's about noticing. Noticing the tightening of your chest when you feel judged, the warmth in your belly when someone makes you laugh, the urge to interrupt when you feel misunderstood, to simply see these moments without pretending they're not there. And in that seeing, to choose your next step consciously, to breathe before reacting, to soften your tone, to ask, what is really needed here? Sometimes it's silence, sometimes a hand gently reaching out, sometimes the humility to say, I was wrong, and other times the wisdom to walk away. But in each case, mindfulness turns an automatic habit into a sacred choice. And over time, these tiny choices reshape not only your relationships, but your entire life. It might sound small, pausing before replying to a text, noticing the tone of your voice when you're frustrated, choosing to look up from your phone when your child speaks. But these are the places where love either thrives or withers, because we don't lose each other in grand betrayals. We lose each other in the 1,000 tiny moments of distraction, in the hurried nods, the half-hearted replies, the dismissive shrugs, the unchecked irritation. Mindfulness is the antidote to this quiet erosion. It invites you to return again and again to the simple miracle of being here together. And from that place, A new kind of interaction is born, one rooted not in roles or expectations, but in real, living connection. You begin to sense the person beneath the persona, to hear not just their words but the longing behind them. You notice when their laughter is forced, when their silence is heavy, when their kindness hides an old ache, and you respond not with cleverness but with presence, because presence heals. It says, "I see you, right here as you are, and it's enough." No advice needed, no performance required, just two human beings meeting in the holy ordinariness of now. This is practical mindfulness, not locked away in some distant monastery but moving through the messy streets of your life. It doesn't demand perfection, only a willingness to begin, to catch yourself when you drift, to laugh at your own clumsiness, to start again this very breath, and slowly you realize it was never about changing others. It was about changing how you show up, because when you meet the world with presence, the world softens in return. The sharp edges round, the rush slows, the ordinary moments glow, and you discover something precious. Every interaction is a chance to practice peace. Not someday, not when you're wiser or calmer or more healed, but now, in this glance, this word, this fragile, fleeting moment, the only one that's ever real. It happens so quietly. One misunderstanding, a forgotten word, a tiny resentment left unspoken, and soon the warmth between two hearts begins to cool. We find ourselves tiptoeing around conversations, speaking through sighs instead of words, carrying old arguments like invisible stones in our chest. The truth is, most of our relationships exist in a delicate tension, a constant dance between love and frustration, between craving connection and protecting our wounds. And we've learned unconsciously to armor ourselves, to smile while holding back, to listen while secretly rehearsing our defense, to nod while bracing for the next disappointment. This is the chaos we live in, not the chaos of loud arguments, but the quieter chaos of disconnection, of people sitting in the same room but miles apart inside, of families gathered around a table, yet no one truly there, of friendships sustained by nostalgia but empty of new, honest moments. But what if there's another way? A way to move from this silent war into something softer, freer, and whole. Not by fixing others, not by winning conversations, not by pretending everything is fine, but by transforming how we relate from the inside out. The Buddha called it right relationship, a way of being with others rooted in understanding, equanimity, and compassion. It begins with one daring act, dropping the armor, letting go of the need to be right, of the urge to protect your image, of the fear that you must always have the upper hand. Because as long as we live behind these walls, no true connection is possible. To relate harmoniously, you must first meet yourself with honesty, to notice your triggers without blaming, to witness your jealousy without shame, to acknowledge your loneliness without disguise. Because when you can hold your own suffering with tenderness, you stop demanding that others carry it for you. You no longer need to punish them for your wounds, to seek validation in their approval, to manipulate silence into power. Instead, you become a sanctuary, not a battlefield, a space where anger is met with curiosity, not retaliation, where sorrow is allowed to speak without being fixed, where joy is shared without envy, and slowly the air between you changes. Old patterns lose their grip, conversations open, misunderstandings soften. You realize that every person before you is carrying their own invisible history. 1,000 heartbreaks, 100 disappointments, an unspoken ache for belonging. And you begin to meet them, not as opponents or obligations, but as fellow travelers. Both of you flawed, both of you beautiful in your brokenness, both of you deserving of grace. From this place, even chaos becomes a teacher. An argument isn't the end of love. It's a mirror, a call to look deeper, to ask, what fear am I clinging to? What old story is speaking now? And in seeing this, the argument shifts. It's no longer you against me. It's us against the misunderstanding. It's us against the old wounds that neither of us created, but both of us inherited. And harmony, real harmony, isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of awareness in the middle of it. It's the ability to pause in the heat of a sharp word and choose kindness, to feel hurt rising in your chest and breathe, to disagree fiercely and still reach for each other afterward. In this way, mindfulness becomes not a distant practice but the heartbeat of every relationship. And over time, a new way of relating is born, a love that isn't fragile, a friendship that doesn't wither at the first silence, a family bond that allows both closeness and space. This is the way of those who choose to stay awake inside their connections. And while the world around us may still rush, may still clash, may still forget to listen, we become a quiet rebellion, a refuge, a reminder that even in chaos, harmony is always possible because it doesn't begin out there. It begins here, with this breath, this moment, this choice to meet the world not with our old defenses, but with the courage to be fully, imperfectly human. And so here we are, not at the end of a story, but standing at the edge of a new one. Because every relationship, whether it lasted a lifetime or a moment, leaves behind a trail of invisible threads. Threads of tenderness, threads of regret, threads of lessons we didn't know we needed. And when you look closely, you realize those threads aren't separate. They weave together into the quiet tapestry of your life. There's a story the Buddha told of a man who asked him, "Master, how should we love in a world so full of sorrow?" The Buddha smiled, and he said, like holding a lotus flower, not gripping, not craving, but simply allowing it to be beautiful in your hands for as long as it's meant to. And maybe that's what mindful love truly is. Not a love that owns, not a love that clings, but a love that sees the fragility in those we care for, sees the tides of joy and pain in every bond, sees the small, shimmering moments where two hearts meet, not perfectly, but honestly. Because in the end, love is not something you find. It's something you practice, in the way you pause before reacting, in the way you choose kindness when silence would be easier, in the way you stay curious about the people you think you already know. And if you live this way, slowly, quietly, without fanfare, something beautiful happens. Your relationships stop being a source of tension and start becoming places of refuge. Not perfect, but sacred in their imperfections. A space where both joy and pain are allowed to breathe. And you begin to see that the story of mindful love isn't about grand declarations. It's about the little things, the gentle reaching for a hand after an argument, the steady presence when words run out, the laughter shared over simple meals, the silent forgiveness offered without request. And one day, without even realizing it, you'll become someone's soft place to land, not because you've mastered love, but because you've mastered presence. And in that presence, every relationship transforms, every conversation softens, every goodbye becomes a little less bitter, and every reunion a little more tender. You won't avoid heartache, you won't bypass loneliness, but you'll meet them differently as old, familiar teachers, teaching you again and again. That love in its purest form isn't about having, it's about seeing, about staying awake to the wonder of being here together for this brief, miraculous moment. So as this chapter closes, don't think of it as an ending. Think of it as a door, a quiet invitation to return to your own life, to your people, your stories, your tangled, beautiful connections, to sit with them a little longer, to listen a little deeper, to forgive a little faster, and to love not perfectly but mindfully, because in the end, maybe that's the only kind of love that was ever real.